Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1017 for August 13th, 2023. Coming up in a few minutes.
And the QR code will lead you to a private link where you can stream and download the music that is not available on streaming sites. It's exclusive to the release of the whiskey. The idea is that the music is made better by the whiskey, and the whiskey is made better by the music.
Whiskey and music go together like a hand in a glove. Felipe Schrieberg and his performing partner Paul Archibald have launched a combination record label and independent bottler in Rhythm and Booze Records. Their music is linked to the whiskey through a QR code on the bottle, in this case, a 13-year-old blended malt. I'll talk with Felipe Schrieberg later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. We'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, behind the label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
How about a really great 12-year-old Scotch whiskey? I have a stellar recommendation coming up for you in just a minute. Spoiler alert, it's Dewar's 12-year-old.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Small batch. How would you describe it? It's like an Irishman's understanding of baseball. Extremely limited.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. North America's second-largest brewer is expanding its presence in the whiskey business. Molson Coors has acquired Blue Run Spirits for an undisclosed amount and will merge the Blue Run portfolio with its own Five Trail and Barman 1873 whiskeys under the Coors Whiskey Company division within Molson Coors. I talked with Coors Whiskey Company's executive chairman David Coors and Blue Run Spirits CEO Mike Montgomery after the deal was announced this week.
Yeah, it was a wonderful night in Louisville, Kentucky, and was there visiting with some of our Bardstown friends, and they invited us to a dinner where there happened to be three of the Blue Run team members there. So Jesse and John McKnight, as well as Andy Brown, and I had a couple team members, and we were just catching up over dinner, and it was the start of what blossomed into a great relationship. And as we got to know each other better and understood each other's visions and what we were each trying to accomplish, it evolved into where we are today, which is great.
Mike, why sell now?
Well, it's not about now versus later. It's about finding the right partner and the right opportunity. And, you know David well, and you know what kind of person he is, and the type of team he's built is really just a reflection of who he is as a person. And so, we weren't looking to sell now. But once it's almost like, being younger and not necessarily looking to get married, but then you meet the right person and it just comes together. And that's what it was like with Molson Coors. And that's what it was like meeting David. It just fell into place. The right people, the right opportunity, and the right opportunity to work together to build something even bigger and even better. And so that's where the excitement comes from. And, that's why we're here today.
David, this seems like pretty much a bolt-on acquisition for Molson Coors. Is that the case?
I think it's kind of a 1 + 1 = 3. What I fell in love with as I got to know the Blue Run team and their business model and certainly their product and brand. It was one of those things where I felt like we could learn a ton from them, and obviously we could provide some resources to them. And so it'd be really a reciprocating relationship and combining the two businesses and trying to create something that's quite special.
Tell me how the distillery construction is going to work now, because you guys announced, Dave or Mike, that back in March that you were going to build the distillery in Georgetown. I assume that is still part of the plan, right?
Yeah, I can take that, Mark.
Okay.
It's one of those things that we fell in love with as we started, learning more about the Blue Run, plans and ambitions and how they approach things, and really trying to break the mold and create something unique and special. And and something that I've certainly wanted, but that they also had plans for was building a home in Kentucky. And it was something that we committed to. We said we believe that is the right thing for the business, and we still believe that, and are looking forward to leveraging their ideas and just the way they've approached things to make it a reality.
How do you merge the existing Coors Whiskey Company portfolio into the Blue Run portfolio?
Yeah, I think what's great is that now we have, a true portfolio crossing a bunch of different price points as well as demographics and consumer segments. And so we have a product for every whiskey drinker that's out there, or even inbound whiskey drinkers that we're trying to court into the category. So I think they complement each other. There's no overlap, and they each have good, strong brand positionings that we can lean into.
Was it the people that attracted you more, or the spirits that attracted you more, David?
Everything is people, right? It's whenever you go into business together, if you don't have a good relationship and good team and good people, no matter how good the opportunity is, life is too short. You want to be working with people that you enjoy and trust and think you can learn from. And I certainly found that across the full Blue Run team as I got to know them more and more. And I'm thrilled that they're all sticking around as part of this. We've got all four of the core founders and the team as well behind them all coming on board for this.
Mike, that includes Jim Rutledge and Shaylin Gammon, right?
I'm really excited about that, Mark. It does. So Jim is going to make the transition with us, and he'll continue in his same role, as will Shaylin Gammon, who, as you know, Mark, was our first hire and is an absolute rising star. And so we think that team of Jim and Shaylin is really magical, and we're happy that that's going to continue under Molson Coors.
Tell me about the process of going from a small entrepreneurial company to becoming part of a division within a mega company within the spirits industry.
Well, today is day 2, so I can't tell you too much about it. But what I can say is that we are not going to lose our entrepreneurial spirit. That's one of the things that drives Blue Run. We're excited to add the Blue Run touch to the two products that are joining us in Five Trail and Barman 1873. There's no need to change the way we act and the way we think. But overall, I think that's what David and his team are excited about, is that we bring this outsider's perspective. We bring a new and unique approach. And that's what's driven us so far to this point. And we're just going to keep pushing forward in that direction.
How long will it take to get the teams integrated?
Well, David, you want to answer that one? He's been through more integrations than I have.
We certainly don't want to waste any time, as well as, the key whiskey selling season upon us here shortly. And so we're planning to be fully integrated as quickly as we can get through that whole process. But there certainly are kind of two ways of working in business models and all that kind of stuff that will be worked on in the background. But for the consumer and our fans out there, we don't expect them to notice any changes.
This really helps you move into the premium part of the whiskey lineup, right?
Yeah, it certainly does. It's a beautiful brand that demands a wonderful price point that the consumers are willing to pay, and I think the brand, what it stands for, and especially the whiskey in the bottle, justifies that. So,
Mike, will this help you get to eventual 50-state and international distribution?
Oh, absolutely. We plan to approach distribution aggressively. And we've known for quite a long time that we have fans in all 50 states and internationally. And we're excited about the opportunity to reach them in a meaningful way.
Anything else you guys can add that I didn't ask about?
Well, Mark, I just want to say we had a very clear vision when we launched Blue Run to do things differently and to create a brand that appealed to a broader, more diverse audience. And we did that through innovation and modernization and a personal touch that's generally absent from whiskey. And it's exciting to me that Molson Coors saw that vision and wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah, the only thing, Mark, I would add is there's some out there that are questioning how we approach things, and we don't plan to make any meaningful changes to the Blue Run business or products other than continue to make them better. I think everything we put out on the Coors Whiskey Co. side of things has proven that we're taking a high quality approach, and anything that we put in a bottle and put out there in the market is going to be top notch, and they've proven that, and as have we. So excited to put the two together and leverage the capabilities on both sides.
The merger will not affect Blue Run's plans to release 3 new whiskeys this fall. In other news, we may be starting to see the bubble in rare whiskey prices coming closer to the bursting point. The latest Knight Frank Luxury Investment Index shows the investment value of rare whiskeys has dropped by 4% over the last 12 months, as inflation shows its impact on the market. In particular, the Macallan Index has seen a 12% drop over the past 12 months. We'll have more on this story next time around. We reported this was coming a couple of months ago, but now it's official. David Beckham has terminated his relationship with Diageo's Haig Club whiskey brand. The move comes amid rumors that Beckham wants to start his own tequila brand. A Diageo spokesperson told the drinks business that the company fully supports Beckham's decision to step away from Haig Club to focus on other pursuits. There's no word on whether Beckham's Inter Miami soccer team will continue to have Haig Club as a sponsor. Beam Suntory is seeking permission to expand in Scotland. The company has applied to East Ayrshire Council for permission to build a new maturation facility near Kingswell. If approved, the site would be able to handle up to 500,000 barrels of whiskey. The planning process now calls for public consultation before a final decision is reached. Some of the barrels to be housed at that facility would likely come from Laphroaig, and the brand announced a change in packaging this week. The secondary tubes will be disappearing from the market in favor of a more recycling-friendly carton. The move is expected to help cut Laphroaig's carbon emissions by 30%. Meanwhile, Maker's Mark has an announcement scheduled for this Wednesday. In an email sent to Maker's Mark ambassadors, the company hinted that an aged version may be announced. The current age for Maker's Mark bottlings averages around 5 years and 9 months. We'll have more on this announcement next time around. New whiskeys announced this week. Heaven Hill is leveraging its partnership with this year's Ryder Cup with a new version of Elijah Craig Bourbon. The Ryder Cup limited edition is finished in European oak barrels that were toasted with a profile similar to that used in Italy's Lazio wine region, near where the Ryder Cup will be contested next month. The commemorative bottling is a one-time-only release that will carry a recommended retail price of $99.99 a bottle. I'll have my tasting notes for it in a few minutes. Heaven Hill has also released the spring 2023 batch of Old Fitzgerald Bottled in Bond Bourbon. The whiskey was distilled in the spring of 2013. The 10-year-old bourbon carries a recommended retail price of $139.99 a bottle. Hemingway Whiskey Company has unveiled the new signature edition of Hemingway Rye Whiskey. The whiskey comes from the Call family, which sourced and blended the whiskey to be finished in rum-seasoned Oloroso sherry casks. I'll have my tasting notes for it soon at whiskycast.com. We featured the revival of Rosebank Distillery on the show a couple of weeks ago. Rosebank has now released a 30-year-old bottling exclusively for the Asian market. It's the first expression in Rosebank's Revival series, with a total of 6 whiskeys to be released in the coming years. Only 800 bottles are available in Asia, with a recommended price of 86,000 Taiwanese dollars. That's about $2,700 US dollars at current exchange rates. Tom & Toole Distillery has released a new travel retail exclusive series of whiskeys inspired by the Cairngorms National Park that surrounds the distillery. The lineup includes the Tundra Bourbon Cask and Tor Oloroso Sherry Cask bottlings, along with the Tarn Peated Single Malt. Prices range from £40 for the Tundra to £55 for the Tor. The collection is available at World Duty Free airport shops worldwide. And finally, Brooklyn's Widow Jane Distillery has rolled out its Paradigm Rye nationally in the U.S. after a soft launch in key markets. It's the first nationally available Widow Jane release that includes whiskey distilled at the Widow Jane Distillery in Brooklyn's Red Hook neighborhood. It's bottled at 46.5% ABV and carries a recommended retail price of $49.99 a bottle. I tasted this whiskey last year when it was first released, and you can find my tasting notes for it at whiskycast.com. That's also where you can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Time now to take a look at the calendar of upcoming whiskey events going on around the world. It's brought to you by Ryder's Tears. This week's highlight is the Whiskey Fringe in Edinburgh, Scotland, which gets underway on Friday and runs through next Sunday. Bourbon's Bistro in Louisville, Kentucky will be busy. There's a Penelope Bourbon dinner on the 23rd, and the next night there's an open party to celebrate the bar's winning Global Whiskey Bar of the Year in Whiskey Magazine's Icons of Whiskey Awards this year. The Whiskey Exchange hosts a tasting of American whiskeys in London on the 23rd, and the Twisted Tail in Philadelphia has a National Whiskey Sour Day event coming up on the 25th. The Varmdo Whiskey Festival is August 26th in Varmdo, Sweden. Spirit of Speyside Distilled is September 1st and 2nd in Elgin, Scotland, and the Kopenicker Whiskey Herbst is that same weekend in Berlin, Germany. We have a searchable calendar of whiskey events at the all-new WhiskyCast.com website and in the WhiskyCast community app. The calendar is brought to you by Ryder's Tears.
Ryder's Tears Copper Pot, an 18th century style of premium Irish whiskey, blended from single pot still and single malt. Like yourself, it's one of life's treasured rarities, and what's rare is wonderful. Ryder's Tears Copper Pot.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
So, in Spain, they call Redbreast Petit Roco. It's me, but a touch more exotic. Kind of like a Redbreast PX edition. Finished in Pedro Jimenez casks, adding a velvety and decadent dimension. You know, I won't lie. A climate like this makes me wish I was a migratory bird.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock and the Classic Malts lineup. There's something about listening to the blues that brings out the best in a whiskey, and the same goes for drinking whiskey while listening to the blues. Felipe Schrieberg and Paul Archibald have been combining the two for years as the Rhythm and Booze Project, playing and conducting tastings all over the UK and Europe. They even turned a Lagavulin barrel into a bass drum. Now they've expanded their profile with not only a new record label, Rhythm and Booze Records, but one that combines an independent bottler with the music. I spent some time recently on a Zoom call with Felipe Schrieberg. So let's talk about the Rhythm and Booze Project. What prompted you guys to start performing together, one, and then create a record label and an independent bottler around it?
Yeah, so we started as student musicians playing in, started out as a band, and then went on to become many different bands over the years. We met at the University of St. Andrews in Fife, in Scotland. I am from California originally, but studied in Scotland and lived there for 11 years. Now I live in the north of Poland, but whatever. And we'd been playing together for many, many years, and we liked whiskey. Whiskey's very nice. And we both eventually moved to Edinburgh. Both were students out there doing our masters. Paul did a second degree, then a master's, then a PhD. And then from there, as we both got more and more into whiskey, we started and we committed more towards music. Over the years living out there, we had the idea, well, I love whiskey. I'd been out there before on family holiday. why don't we do an Isla tour like you would typically do a band tour, but we don't want money. We want food, beds, whiskey. And that's how it began. So we went out there June of 2012, and it was one of these kind of life-changing trips where all the magic was there. We got to meet so many incredible people. Because it wasn't the festival, we were meeting the locals. They were the ones that were hosting us, putting up with us, putting us up as well. and then during that trip, we met Georgie Crawford, who was then the distillery manager of Lagavulin, and within whiskey circles, she's quite well known as a wonderful, wonderful figure, now at Port and Trewin. We met her out there, and she was like, "You guys should come play at the Fèis." We're like, "The what?" And we didn't know there was a whiskey festival on Isla. So the next year, we went there, and we've been playing every year since. And during those years that we play at the Fèis, the rest of the time just gigging as musicians or whatever, we're kind of like, these are some of the best gigs we've ever done in our lives. And eventually we realized maybe we should do this the rest of the year, combining the whiskey and the music. And that's the Rhythm and Booze project, how it kicked off as a concept and as a band. Combine what we do as musicians together with great whiskey that we love, and just watch the magic go. And the remit has essentially become just find interesting ways to combine music and whiskey together. So we've been doing that for a few years. Officially, we kicked off that project with that name as a duo in 2018, I'd say. And kind of been going at it since. So it's been a combination of working with distilleries to run events with them, running our own events, doing some odd little fun projects here. We did a bunch of stuff, well, not a bunch of stuff, but we did some stuff during the pandemic, doing live streamed gig tastings as well. And then this for us is the next step. And then now it's about how can we translate that into something beyond just events and happenings and related to whiskey and spirits that we love. And so that's the record label. So yeah, that's the quick rambling introduction, I suppose.
So you're at the point now where you released your first record under your own label and your first whiskey at the same time.
We're cheating a little bit on the whiskey. So it's the first whiskey under the record label name. So the record label name, Rhythm and Booze Records. So the band, the Rhythm and Booze Project, the label name, Rhythm and Booze Records. As the Rhythm and Booze Project, we have released whiskeys before. We've done a couple single cask releases. We did 3 single cask releases over the pandemic. Each one radically different to the other. Just whiskeys that we found through pals and that we really, really enjoyed. Then with the record label, it was more about we're going to put music to this. The music you can't find. So the concept behind the record label is you have a bottle of an aged spirit, but we're starting with whiskey because that's what we know best. You're going to have a QR code on the back label, and the QR code will lead you to a private link where you can stream and download the music that is not available on streaming sites. It's exclusive to the release of the whiskey. The idea is that the music is made better by the whiskey, and the whiskey is made better by the music. They're tied together, and that they were both kind of curated in mind for each other. In this case, we made the music first, then found the right whiskey for it. With this particular release, we're open to doing other things that take a different approach in the future. And we're starting, in this case, with the first release, we're starting with ourselves. We are being our own guinea pigs on this. We don't know if this is going to work. We think it will, because why wouldn't it? But we want to test it out with ourselves first. So this is our 13-year-old single sherry cask blended malt. And just because of the profile of it, and in the blend, there's definitely some peated whiskey in there, a whisper of peated whiskey in there. That just goes nicely. And it's got the rich sherried profile that's not over the top sherried. We thought that goes well with the music. And so that's what we've got out there now. And we're hoping in the future, and we've already got plans for our second release, which will also feature a different project that we're in. But then in 2024, we want to bring in other musicians that we think are awesome.
What went into coordinating the music with the whiskey?
Different, and it's a bit different for each one. At the moment, it's been that we've recorded the music, we want to find a spirit that we subjectively think is a good fit for when you've got a dram in hand and you streamed the tunes and you got the music coming in as you're drinking the whiskey. And it just came down to, what do we think works? With our sound, we just, because as a blues duo, we're quite energetic and raucous as a sound, how we play, what we do. So we wanted a whiskey that would reflect that. So we went out to different pals we know, brokers, distilleries that understood what we wanted to do and happy to send us samples of stuff we could potentially try. And we picked the one that we thought was just best, both in terms of profile and that fit the music best as well. And this is the result of that. With the next release we're doing, it's a similar thing, completely different profile, and it's going to be a rum up next. But with this, though, it was the whiskey, and that was just, for us, just heads above everything else in terms of how it fit the sound with this kind of richer profile. My dream, and who knows when we'll get there, but I hope we'll get there someday, is that we can create a blend to the music. So we have the music already, and then we can blend a whiskey inspired by the music. That's when we were able to scale up a bit and do a bit more and play around with things. But for now, we're starting with curated single casks.
Which is harder, finding single casks of whiskey or finding bands for your label?
Right now, I'll put it this way. Neither are hard. The trick is to find the right combination. Yeah. So when we were trying samples, they were tasty whiskeys, but actually this first release, it was actually really straightforward. Got a few things immediately. It was like, boom, that's the one. This rum that we've got coming out later in the year, that was actually much harder and took a lot more time to find something that was appropriate for the music that we had recorded. So that was trickier. So, and I suspect every time we do a new release, it's going to be different. Its own kind of fun and pain involved in trying to make something work well.
So what makes you happier, getting a good review for your whiskey or a good review for your music?
Well, I want to be arrogant and say, I don't care that much about reviews because I want to go with what I think is awesome. If I think it's awesome, then I'm happy. That would be a lie. Because inevitably you want to see what people think and you want to see what they consider. I would care more personally, just because we've not been in a situation where we've yet had reviews for the music. The reviews we've gotten so far have been just for the liquid. But I think I would care much more about what people think about the whiskey or whatever spirit we bottle. If we're putting out something musically, it's because we as musicians just feel like, yep, we've done this. Whatever you think, you can think whatever. We're proud of it. Hopefully there's people that will understand why we are proud of it. With whiskey, personally, I find there's so many ways in which you can be thrown off. My fiance likes to play a game where you'll try 5 whiskeys. You'll try them, taste them, make mental notes of them or whatever. And then you have to put on a blindfold and you get served them in a random order and you have to guess which was which. On paper, sounds very straightforward. It is not. It can be so hard to do. So I doubt my palate and nose all the time. Yes, I'm a professional. Yes, I know I can identify things from nose and taste and things like this. I'm definitely not at the level as some people or some master blenders that you encounter, for example, or certain you may have come across, or you yourself might be one, Mark. You come across some super tasters that just do some insane stuff that you're just not even, close to there.
I wouldn't call myself one.
Yeah, so I would say I if somebody agrees with what we've picked or curated or blended, I think that would be much more heartening because it's kind of like, okay, yes, my palate didn't let me down. Yes. Whereas music, I think I can, if I'm putting something out, I trust my instincts as a musician more to not worry about what reviews are, negative or positive. Yeah, that's my rambling answer, Mark.
And you have a reputation as a whiskey writer to uphold.
Yeah, I know. I think like you is if you're happy with what you're putting out, do you have to worry about your reputation? If you are passionate and dedicated and putting in the work, I don't worry about that so much as I'm sure it is for you, given how your longevity and quality and how long you've been doing this for. So yeah, I personally don't worry too much about that aspect of things. If you're coming at it from the right place, then
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. You keep the passion and the professionalism there. You want good reviews, but it doesn't matter. If somebody writes a bad one, somebody writes a bad one. They're going to say what they want.
I mean, you can't control it, right? You can only do your best. I don't. In this case, I think if I think too much about what reviewers might think, then I think it's just not taking. That just means you're not going to take the right approach about what you should do, or at least I've got enough things to think about, much less what reviewers might think. I'm just glad that of the reviews we've seen so far, they've been good, and it's so. I don't know Tice that well, but I do know Ruben. So whiskynotes.be. He's a heavy hitter in the review world, I think, anyways. And he writes great tasting notes, and he's honest about what he tastes. And everything he wrote, I thought was spot on. He gave us an 86. Could the score have been higher? Sure, but in terms of what he wrote, of what he tasted and smelled, I'm completely on board. He's totally he's totally smelling and tasting what I'm smelling and tasting. I felt really aligned with that. So if somebody like him feels aligned with it, then I'm happy.
When you start looking for artists for rhythm and blues records, are you going to stick to the blues genre, or are you going to go all around?
No. We want to go all over the place. We want to go nuts. So this first release is the blues duo. That's already integrated into the whiskey ecosystem, especially the Scotch whiskey ecosystem. But the second release, the rum, that's a Latin quartet where I sing original songs in Spanish. A completely different thing. This is a band that does not exist online. We only gig once a year during the Edinburgh Fringe. That's pretty much been it for, I think, 5 years now almost. So, but we're very proud of what we've recorded, and it's completely different. But a rum is a good fit for it because of the kind of Latin influences involved. Completely different genres. And anybody we bring in, we care much more about making sure that the liquid fits the music, whatever it is. And we're ready to consider, and we are considering all kinds of sounds.
One final question. How did you guys turn a whiskey barrel into a bass drum?
Yeah, that was a fun project. So in 2019, I'm going to say 2019. I think it was 2019. Might have been 2018. The pandemic kills your sense of time. We had the idea of doing this, and conceptually we knew let's take a whole cask and make a drum out of it. So we knew we wanted to do that project. And so we managed to corral Diageo somehow into letting us do it, and to do it with Lagavulin, which was poetic for us because it was through meeting Georgie and Lagavulin that we got involved more deeply in music and whiskey as a whole. So we were really pleased about that. And so we got in, so we knew what we wanted to do. We knew theoretically what we wanted to do, which was essentially replace the cask ends with the heads that would serve, and you just keep everything in place. You keep the staves and the chime hoops in place. You just knock out the cask ends and stretch whatever it is you need to stretch to create the drum heads. And we brought in somebody to help, a guy who specialized in vintage drum making and repairs, based in the south of England. When we talked about the project, he was all over it. He put together a plan in place. And to get geeky with it, he used the design of a percussion instrument called a Viennese timpani as the inspiration. And he stretched goat skin over either side. So we knocked out the cask ends, and then we stretched goat skin over either side. And then he had a whole crazy system of different little screws and levers in place to hold it together like a timpani. And they still got it. They've got it at the distillery. When we were there at the Fèche, they put it on some kind of cool pedestal stand randomly in like one of the tasting warehouses. I think they didn't quite know what to do with it, but they knew that it was cool. So that was, yeah. And then when we recorded it, we played it in the malt mill at the Lagavulin distillery, and our audio engineer brought in all the mics so we could get as much of the sound of it as possible. And it's a pretty unique sound. Sounds the closest thing I would say that I could remember hearing to that drum is like a taiko drum, that big booming thunderous sort of sound. So it was a very, very cool project to do, and very glad that we got to do it with Lagavulin.
Is there anything else you can add I didn't ask about?
I guess in terms of getting slightly ranty about it, we see first is the line I'm using all the time is I think we're only at the beginning of seeing how music and whiskey can come together. We're seeing a lot of new projects that have all of a sudden emerged over the last couple of years, some a bit more gimmicky than others, some with more substance. I think we're at the tip of the iceberg. I think there's so much that can be done in ways that help make music special in an age where music is becoming more and more background music in terms of how it's consumed, in ways that makes the whiskey special too. So I think we're at the very beginning of that. This is our way of trying to do it. But then also this is our attempt at bypassing the music industry. Musicians don't make money from music anymore. Everything is falling apart. Streaming is exploitative. Touring is very hard. You have to really, really, really commit and really have your act together to be able to really make a living from touring. And in some cases, if you're able to harness social media effectively, then you can you can convert your social media following to making a living from your art. But I've got a small baby, so I can't tour. I'm not good at social media, frankly. So it ain't going to be that. And so really, what's it come down to? And there's a lot of people out there like me, or a lot of musicians out there like me. And streaming, forget it, because it's a whole system that relies on exploitation and gatekeeping. So never mind that. So this is our way of completely circumventing it. And after using ourselves as guinea pigs, it's important for us to bring in other artists because we see it as a conceptual out of the exploitation, while doing something that's artistically really interesting and that brings in the nose and palate as well. So I think that's important. And I think that's going to be what makes this venture successful as we go.
Thanks to Felipe Schrieberg for joining us on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. There's a link for more details at the WhiskyCast website. WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. Let's start off the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the Rhythm and Booze Records release number 1. Again, it's a 13-year-old sherry cask matured blended malt bottled at 50% ABV. The nose has notes of toffee, dried flowers, and wood spices. The taste has a toffee sweetness balanced by wood spices and brown sugar, while the finish is long and spicy. I'm scoring the Rhythm and Booze Records release number 1 a 92. Next up, let's look at the latest Distillery Series release from Jack Daniel's. This one is a distillery-exclusive bottling, finished in añejo tequila casks that had previously been used for Jack Daniel's. It's bottled at 45% ABV, and the nose has touches of lime zest, a soft oakiness, milk chocolate, and a hint of agave. The agave comes out on the palate strongly along with notes of lime, dry spices, honey, and vanilla, while the finish has lingering dry spices and hints of agave and lime. I have to admit that this one isn't to my taste, but that doesn't make it a bad whiskey. I'm scoring the Jack Daniel's Distillery Series Añejo Tequila Cask finish an 89. Now let's look at the Old Fitzgerald Bottled in Bond Spring 2023 edition I mentioned during the news. Again, it's a 10-year-old bourbon bottled at 50% ABV. The nose has touches of caramel, tobacco, leather, dried flowers, and a hint of molasses. The taste is peppery and fruity with apples, peaches, black cherries, and wood spices. The finish is long and peppery with a hint of cherries, and I'm scoring the Old Fitzgerald Spring 2023 Bottled in Bond Bourbon a 93. Now that one uses Heaven Hill's Wheated Bourbon Mash Bill. The Elijah Craig Ryder Cup Limited Edition uses the standard Rye Forward Mash Bill, but it's finished in toasted European oak casks. The nose on this one has dried fruits, baked apples, honey, and a hint of toffee. By the way, it's bottled at 47% ABV. The taste has notes of cherry cola, baked apples, dry spices, toffee, and vanilla. The finish is long with subtle spices and a nice fruity character. I'm scoring the Elijah Craig Ryder Cup Limited Edition a 93. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 3,500 different whiskeys from all around the world. Check it out this week at the all-new WhiskyCast.com.
Gabriel here. The new Dewar's 12-year-old has been completely remastered to be richer, smoother, and more balanced. It's a total winner. It's double-aged in first-fill premium bourbon casks for greater depth and breadth of flavor, with notes of apples, lemon zest, and spicy and floral notes with a long, smooth vanilla finish. The experts agree, too. It's winning awards like pros sink putts. In fact, WhiskyCast's own Mark Gillespie gave it a 94-point rating, which is pretty amazing for a 12-year-old Scotch. It's also earned a 94-point rating from Whiskey Advocate. That makes it their highest-rated 12-year-old Scotch whiskey. It's an excellent testament to the skill, craft, and refinement of the world's most awarded blended Scotch whiskey, Dewar's. Drink responsibly. Copyright 2023 Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume.
Let's open up the WhiskyCast community app for some of this week's comments. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey. First, I want to thank Gary H.N. for his special contributions in the app this week. He's been posting daily updates from Tasmania Whiskey Week in Australia all week long, and this was his last contribution. Final day of Tasmanian Whiskey Week 2023, a nice afternoon of comedy and drams down at Hobart Brewing Company. This has been an epic week of whiskey, food, and friends. We'll post some pictures and do a bit more of a write-up this week. Gary, thank you again. Dana Hamilton tweeted this following last week's episode with archaeologist Derek Anderson of the National Trust for Scotland. I missed my calling in life, Indiana Jones and his Ark. Ha! I can picture it now, a bullwhip in one hand and a jug of 100-year-old Scotch in the other. Thanks, Dana. The other day, the folks at Master of Malt asked if people on Twitter could remember the first whiskey they tried and what it was. Sean Fauché responded to that tweet with this note. 24 years ago at our wedding reception, my dad brought a Glenlivet 12-year-old. Since then, we've celebrated every major family event with a different bottle of Glenlivet. I kept the labels and had them framed around a pick of the Glenlivet stills by WhiskyCast. Thank you, Sean. I'm honored to have a small part in your family's history. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, download the free WhiskyCast community app from the Apple or Google App Stores and join the conversation. You can also find us on Twitter, still not calling it X yet, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey, where they explore the frontiers of natural flavor one farm at a time to create unique Irish whiskies. Visit them on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history and science that makes whiskey unique. Our question this week comes from the WhiskyCast community app and Willem Killian. I don't know much about American whiskey, he writes, but they mentioned something interesting to me at the end of a video on the Heaven Hill website. It's the fact that the whiskey is charcoal filtered before being bottled. I thought this charcoal filtration step was unique to Tennessee whiskey and is what sets it apart. I didn't think that Kentucky bourbons used the same technique. Am I missing some detail that sets the Lincoln County process apart from the rest, or is it just a regional thing? Again, I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to American whiskeys, so I may be the only one surprised to learn this about Heaven Hill. Well, I can understand the confusion, so let's clear things up just a little bit. Almost all bourbons get a bit of charcoal filtration after maturation, largely to remove any pieces of charred wood that may have broken off inside the barrel over time. That is not, though, the same thing as the Lincoln County process that's unique to Tennessee whiskeys. There, new make spirit is filtered through up to 8 feet of sugar maple charcoal before it goes into the barrel. This removes some of the impurities and is thought to make the final whiskey smoother. Lincoln County process whiskeys also get a brief charcoal filtering after maturation, once again to remove any char that's come loose inside the barrel. The exception is Gentleman Jack. It gets a second pass through the 8 feet of sugar maple charcoal before bottling. Willem, I hope that clears things up. Thanks for your question. And if you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, get in touch with us in the WhiskyCast community app or email us comments@whiskycast.com. That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes that goes all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the new WhiskyCast community app. Download it today from the Apple or Google App Stores. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever wondered where Redbreast got its name? Well, let's go back to 1912 and be glad our bird-watching founder didn't spot the bar-tailed godwit that day.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Find the new Dewar's 12-year-old and discover what all the awards are about. You can toast and thank me later. From Dewar's, the world's most awarded blended Scotch whiskey.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2023, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.